The TSARITSA'S lore right now just added her name with all sorts of references to each possible inspiration. On the one hand, you've got the resurrected daughter of the Romanovs put into Genshin as a cold motherly archon, and the other is a puppet archon that is rumored to have survived but is actually dead, just like her real-life counterpart rumors. Even the other members of the Romanov family might have connections to the Shades and the Moons, but right now this little name drop is the main focus of our video. Hey guys, what's up? Aru. So whether you want to see Flins' relation to this royal bloodline or the meaning behind all of the Romanovs in Genshin as the TSARITSA'S siblings, then stick around for this little crack theory regarding the TSARITSA and her executed and resurrected Fae lineage. Starting with her full name, Anastasya Feodorovna Snezhnaya. Now in Greek, Anastasya is a feminine name derived from the Greek word Anastasya, meaning resurrection or rebirth. It's popular in Eastern Europe and Russia, symbolizing new life, hope, and spiritual renewal, often associated with Easter and Christian traditions. But the name itself already fits with Project Stuja, which is theorized to be the first stage of the event called Ragnarok. Many people in Snezhnaya refer to this as the long night or the long blizzard that is to come, where all of the vat is covered by snow. What follows this plan was the next step of Ragnarok, which is the burning of the old world and creating a new era without the heavenly principles, solely controlled by humanity. Currently, that's the TSARITSA'S theorized plan using the Shivada gemstone, toppling the heavenly principles and bring back the old world, which we know as the Dragon World. Now next is the name Feodorovna, which is a Russian patronymic meaning daughter of Fyodor, with Fyodor meaning God's gift, and the suffix ovna meaning daughter of. And for the male counterpart, we have the suffix ovich, which means son of. So if we say Feodorovna, then that means Anastasya Feodorovna Snezhnaya is actually Anastasya, daughter of Theodore of Snezhnaya. It's one of those old full name conventions that includes the father's name and the land or family that they belong to. But Feodorovna also means God-given or God's gift. So if we combine all of her titles, then we roughly get the full title of God-given resurrection of Snezhnaya. Now, whether or not this means she already died long ago and was resurrected into the TSARITSA today, or that she will eventually die in the story and resurrect is still unclear. But this entire title does have connections with the Russian Duchess Anastasya and the rumors about her surviving during the Russian Revolution, which we'll talk about in the next segment. But right now we can focus on her entire family and the naming convention that the Fae Bloodline has, which actually includes Flins. One such example for Anastasya is Anastasya's real-life inspiration, Anastasya Nikolaevna Romanova, which means Anastasya, daughter of Nikolai of the Romanov family. This is why I think the entire Snezhnaya Archon Fae bloodline is inspired from the Romanov family, a Fae lineage that came from the king of all the Fae, the Belyid Tsar. And I think that the Belyid Tsar himself might just be inspired from the actual emperor of Russia, Nicholas II. Now you might say that if the Fae Archon bloodline has this naming convention, then that means that all the other Fae have the same name. And we already have another Fae with the exact naming convention, and he's none other than our Ratnik friend, Kirill Chudomirovich Flins, which means Kirill or Cyril, son of Chudomir of the Flins family. So technically his actual name is Cyril, and we just keep calling him by his surname. But interestingly, for both Flins and Anastasya, their names follow a Slavic deity or divine concept. Just like how Anastasya Feodorovna means God-given resurrection, Kirill Chudomirovich Flins also means Lord, the Son of Wonder and Peace. And if you look at Flins' character lore, there was a mention of a Kirill the Azure Flame who guided lost souls when they died, which fits with his current name, Son of Peace. It's like every Fae is supposed to have a divine right or authority named to them, which actually makes sense because they were created using moonlight and giant bones with the help of the first Seelie, and their original purpose was to level the gods of Celestia and even beat or overthrow the heavenly principles. Another interesting point here is that other lore-related ethnicities have the same naming conventions, particularly for Hebrew and Greek, which we know is inspired from the Old World era and Khaenri'ah. So now we know that every other Fae that we're gonna meet in Snezhnaya likely has the same naming convention as Flins and Anastasya, divine or royal name paired with a divine or royal event, plus their family name or region at the end. So we can expect Pulcinella or other Fae to have the same name once we meet more of them in Snezhnaya, where majority of the Fae are actually found. And in my opinion, Flins is gonna be the one to get us closer to the TSARITSA as well, since his past life existed way before the Belyid Tsar became the first Cryo Archon, as well as being present for the Royal Ball of Nobles of that era. But we're talking about the TSARITSA and not Flins, so we'll go back on topic. Moving on, we've got the entire Romanov family, which I think is where the whole Fae lineage of her bloodline comes from. The name Anastasya comes from the Grand Duchess Anastasya, the youngest daughter of the last sovereign of Imperial Russia, Tsar Nicholas II. The key takeaway here is that she is the youngest daughter and likely also the youngest daughter of the Belyid Tsar, which means that there are other siblings in that family. Feodorovna means daughter of Theodore, but is also the same name as her mother, Alexandra Feodorovna, who was the last empress or Tsarina of the Russian Empire. The reason that this family was the last Tsar and Tsarina, as well as why you think they're important, is that their rule was ended by the revolutionary rise of communism and was brutally murdered by the Bolsheviks during that time. What's interesting here is that after the death of the entire Romanov family, there were actually rumors of the youngest daughter, Anastasya, surviving just 2 years later, named Anastasya Anderson, and another Anastasya that resembled Anastasya Romanov herself physically. So we might have a double Archon situation happening in Snezhnaya as well. But it's worth mentioning that this rumor was debunked once they found the bodies of the Romanovs, but it still did take around 90 years before it was actually debunked. An entire lifetime of a fake Anastasya existed for that long before she was finally found. So looking at it from a Genshin perspective, Anastasya Feodorovna Snezhnaya might actually be a false Archon made to look exactly like the youngest daughter of the Belyid Tsar, and the true events of the Fae King, as well as his sons and daughters, are actually still unknown. Meanwhile, the rest of Snezhnaya and its people took the TSARITSA'S seating at face value because, well, she's the Tsaritsa and she's the daughter of the Belyid Tsar. This makes a lot more sense when you factor in what Venti says about the TSARITSA'S personality. She used to be a god of love, but she suddenly became a cold Archon, even so far as cutting all of her ties with the other Archons and focusing solely on opposing Celestia, taking the Gnosis. And this also adds to my old theory that it's actually Piero controlling the decisions of the Tsaritsa, which is why I made the title that there is no Tsaritsa, it's just Piero. Almost like a puppet Archon used as a face for the public to follow, while the true architect of the show is actually Piero. I've mentioned this theory before in my Snezhnaya video, and honestly it still stands as a good theory for why we've never really heard anything about the Tsaritsa in more detail until now. And even then, it's still very suspicious. And if we consider what the Archons and Nouvelette says, they still only have the old god of love perspective of her, and nothing about this new one. Now that we have one member of the Fae Romanov family completed, what about the other family members? Well, there's a total of 5 children of the Russian Tsar and Tsarina, which is 4 daughters and 1 son. One of them we can theorize as the youngest daughter of the Belyid Tsar and puppet Archon of current-day Snezhnaya, while the other 3 I like to think are more related to the Moon Sisters. Bear in mind that the Fae were created and made to be on the same level as the gods, so it wouldn't be surprising for the Moon Sisters or even the Shades to have Fae counterparts too. And now that I think about it, the 4 daughters of the Belyid Tsar might just be reflecting the shades instead of the moons, with the Tsaritsa, Anastasya specifically, being a contradiction of death. So maybe the other 3 are contradictions of life, space, and time. Now, I looked into the names of every Romanov killed during the revolution, and interestingly, each of them have pretty interesting ties to the plot of Snezhnaya and the rebellion against the heavenly principles, but not exactly the shades or the moons, unless you mix up the names like what happened with the TSARITSA'S. Here's the rough translations I've made for each of the Romanovs, and all of them can be references to humanity and the Fae overthrowing divine rule and the heavenly principles. You've got Blessed Holy Princess, Fairy Queens, and Defenders of Victory, as well as God-given Defender of Mankind and Victory of the People, all of which are centered around humanity and not the gods. Now, there's no particular reason for me to want the Tsaritsa to be similar to Renova, but it would be a fun narrative for the Tsaritsa's love for her people to eventually cause the death of her and her followers as well. Think of it like a tragic romance where her death will lead to the happy ending, and even then she won't really die because her name means God-given resurrection, a mix of 2 names from the Romanov family, so everybody wins. Now, as for the son, Alexei Tsarevich, I specifically think that he's supposed to be the holder and defender of reason, the original and primordial power of Tevat. And I actually think that it's gonna be Flins because of his name and title, the Master and Son of Peace, which is the final goal of the Tsaritsa after defeating the heavenly principles, a land where there are no gods and humanity and the Fae live together peacefully. Now, I know it's a cheesy and dramatic ending, but it's honestly what she wants, and what everybody in the game wants. Because she still does all of this crazy stuff because she cares for her people. And freeing the world from the shackles of Celestia, even at the cost of her death, is not a bad deal. We've seen Celes do the exact same thing, and every Archon already has a growing fondness for humanity. That and Flins actually looks more like Owl than Child does. I mean, just look at this comparison. So to sum it all up, we can expect a resurrection of the Tsaritsa, or the story of her execution and resurrection that led her to become the Tsaritsa today, as well as her 3 sisters and 1 brother who all carry equivalent names that supposedly is prepared for them once we take over Celestia, as well as restoring the original order of Tevat. I won't be surprised if we have to face the Shades in Snezhnaya, or even at least see them in the flesh doing something absolutely horrific, since we're already gonna try and fight against Dottore by the end of Christ's story, as well as having Columbina rise up as the new moon. And I've noticed too that much of the game has been focused more on magic outer world influences instead of just elements and inner Tevat conflicts in general. And it might be good to start talking about magic and runes instead of just elements too, especially with the arrival of the Hexarai and the Hex and Circle members likely being playable at some point. There won't be any more elements and more about air quotes magic instead. But that's pretty much it for this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I was thinking about which character the TSARITSA is gonna be inspired from, but honestly, I don't really care who it's gonna be. Anna-stasia, Bronya, Kokolia, Kiana, anyone, I don't really care. If it's gonna be Misha but a female version, I don't really mind either. But if you guys want me to talk about that and the inspirations of which design she's gonna be, then you can tell me in the comments below and I'll talk about it in a different video. So I guess I'll see you guys in the next video, and as always, stay mad, theorists. Bye!